Okay. Uh, Before we left kasi for Switzerland, there were many requests for interviews, which we weren't able to accommodate simply because we were so busy preparing for Switzerland. So I thought we'd have one uh, once we got back. So here we are. So there's a lot to talk about. So I think you can open the floor.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, Mr. President, and welcome to our friends in broadcast media to this very special sit down with the President with our broadcast media. So today, the President will be entertaining two questions from each of you, and let's get started. We have Ms. Karen Davila of ABS-CBN News.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I'm Karen, and thank you so much for doing this. So I'll be asking you two questions, but you have to forgive me that the first question will have a lot of context in it for agriculture. Losses are driving farmers to desperation.
Yeah.
Some farmers already taking their own lives. In Davos, you said you would only step down as Agri Secretary if you've ticked off items in your bucket list. My question is, what is in that list? And what will you specifically do to implement for farmers to feel a change in their lives today, in the short and medium term?
As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up because we always have been talking about production, non-importation, etc. And we have to always remind ourselves that what we are really talking about is the livelihood of the farmers as well. Not only the supply of food, but of the pricing of food, but also the livelihood of farmers and the future of farmers. I mean, I think it's a much quoted statistic that in the Philippines, the average farmer is 57, 58 years old, and the young people are not that interested to enter into farming. So there are all of these multifaceted problems that we face in terms of agriculture. So again, in the short term, the increasing prices of food products is alarming, and that's why we now have to, whatever we do, we must import. I think my sentiments about importation are clear, but it is an emergency situation that has been brought about by neglect of the agricultural sector for many, many years. And therefore, our production is well below our demand. Therefore, we must import. So, because of the chaos that we saw within question when it came to sugar, when it came to the onions, we did not know how much of the commodity was actually in the country. We're starting to get a handle on it now, and so we are going to put in terms of sugar. I mentioned specifically before that we will from now on maintain a 2-month buffer stock. That is to mitigate the speculation. Alam mo, normal yan sa negosyante. Pag alam nila magkaka-shortage, they will keep it hanggang tumaas yung presyo. Maybe you can call that hoarding, but it's a business practice. And that's what we hope to avoid. In terms of onions naman, ganun pa rin ang sitwasyon. We are not producing as much as we consume, and therefore we still have to import. But the schedule of importation, both of sugar and onion, all of the other commodities, the schedule is very, very important. It's not just a question of one lump importation at the beginning of the year. It has to come in at the proper time. So you're not competing with local farmers. So that's a very simple first step. Pag maayos na yan, that is one box that I've been able to tick. Now but we come back to the problem of production. So that, again, we still have to put into place. Once I know that the value chain has already been put together, never mind that it is functioning yet, but we already know what needs to be done in each part of that value chain. And we have the means and we have a plan. Then we will have a secretary who will then take my place and will implement that plan. Basta alam natin yung nakakaintindi doon sa ating ginagawa. So those are the essential elements that I'm talking about. There's some reorganization that needs to be done in the Department of Agriculture for the simple reason that we are doing different things from what we were doing before. And so you have to restructure the bureaucracy in like fashion.
I wanted to ask, you said you have a bucket list that needs to be ticked off. Would you share some? I mean,
Well, that's it.
That's it.
That's basically it. I mean,
Yeah.
within within that subject matter, hindi lang yan. I mean, if you go into detail, there are still very many things that we need to do. In terms of production, we have to help the farmers. We have to enter. We are trying to adopt new techniques for the uh, for farming that will actually that we will be able to use new technology, new varieties, start with the R&D, all that of and especially in the area of agriculture, the overarching issue is climate change. We have we're having a very tough time uh, scheduling these things because the weather keeps changing. And that one of the reason I've also made contact with several other countries and my counterparts in several countries is that we are trying to develop what we refer to as non-traditional suppliers. And because of the price of fertilizer, the lack of export of wheat, rice, of course, is another thing that we import. Corn, we were going to have to import. But with the shocks that have hit the global economy and with the supply chain problems that we see everywhere, then that is something that we have to work around. And the way to do it is to have many sources of supply so that whatever happens, we have somewhere to go. Hopefully, down the road, in a few years, we no longer have to worry about non-traditional supply because we will be able to produce enough for ourselves.
Mr. President, about the Maharlika Wealth Fund,
Mm,
Congressman Joey Salceda talked about a re-engineered fund.
mm,
And I wanted to ask you, he said he described it as the securitization of 44 billion pesos,
mm,
and it will be listed in the stock market.
mm.
You have lawmakers, opposition lawmakers, who say that under the law, 50% of the income of GOCCs have to be remitted to the National Treasury, and you use it for the budget. So, along with that, how could you ensure that the fund won't be used for money laundering, given you will be
Okay.
accepting private
Let's
funding?
do two in one there.
Yes.
We'll do the first one first. First of all, the idea of using the GOCCs to put value into the Maharlika Fund was broached in Davos, and it was brought up. I don't know why it's made this news here immediately to the Philippines, and people are very concerned about it. I watched your interview with Congressman Ed Selegman
Thank you.
this morning,
Yeah.
and I have heard the comments that Congressman Joey Salceda has made and his concerns that he had aired. I agree with that. You cannot use funds of the GOCC. Pera ng gobyerno, what will the government spend? It was a proposal. It's not something that we have adopted. The GOCCs, there are several problems because I remember we had a little meeting, lasted about 15 minutes, and that was proposed. But after the meeting, I pulled Secretary Ben Jokno aside, and we said, what do you think? Sabi niya, hindi yata pwede. And I said, it's too disruptive. Think, every single GOCC has its own charter. How will you will then revise all of those charters to align with the Maharlika Fund? That's not the purpose of the GOCC, number one. Number two, this is a lot of income that goes to the national government that will suddenly disappear. So that will be sorry, it will not disappear. It will go into the Maharlika Fund and cannot be used for the budget of the national government. And we have many things that we would like to appropriate in the coming years, and we will need those funds. So I don't think that's a viable proposition, at least not for us. I've seen, I know that there are other sovereign wealth funds that did it that way, but it's parang hindi bagay sa atin yun. Kaya we are a little lukewarm about that idea. The worry about the fund being used as a money laundering device implies that private monies will be put into the fund. But yes, private monies will be involved with the fund, but it's not a savings account that you just put it there and it stays there. No, what will happen is the Maharlika Fund will serve as the seed fund for the sovereign wealth fund, and the 40 billion, 30 billion, 40 billion, whatever it may come to at that point, is going to serve as a seed money for the fund. Now, whenever we come into partnership, we do a G2G with Japan, for example, or we do a PPP with some big outfit, then it is only the time that the monies come into the fund to be used for the program. Hindi yun basta, o sige, bigyan niyo ako ng ilang bilyon dolyar, tapos lalagay lang yun, akong bahala na dyan. It's not like that at all. And in fact, even on our end, we will only deploy funds when there is a very specific project to be paid for. So money laundering just won't come into it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Karen Davila of
Thank you, sir.
ABS-CBN. Next, we have Ms. Cheryl Cosim of TV5.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I'm Cheryl Cosim representing TV5. And sama ko na rin po yung 1PH and 1 News. So ibig sabihin ba nun, 6 questions pwede? I'm just... Galing negotiator. Okay, my first question concerns the positions in your administration. First, just a little over a month ago, you granted former PMS Chief Naida Angping's leave after she asked for personal time for herself and her family. What made you appoint her as ambassador to France, considering she never held any diplomatic post before this? And who will replace her?
Well, I need to use this? Very good.
Sir,
Okay,
since- okay.
well, the situation with then Secretary Naida Angpin was that it was a personal decision on her part. She had some personal issues that she had to work through. And she said, I cannot do my work while I'm having to go through this. And that's why I need to go and think about it. And she came back and she said, maybe I can just find something that will not, that I will be able to handle. And I said, what do you think? And she said, if you could appoint me to a diplomatic position. She has not held formally a diplomatic position, but she has been working with the Foreign Service for years and years and years. Tao yan ng Uncle Kokoy ko. And she worked in the American Embassy, the Philippine Embassy in the United States. She worked in China. She worked in all of the areas that we were slowly opening up. So sanay siya sa trabaho yan. And she has said that she had for years now been working on her Foreign Service exam. So I think that's what she's going to plan to do now. Yun talagang gusto niyang gawin since before. So now we'll formalize her wishes. So, but again, the reasons for it are personal. So I don't think it's my place to talk about that. You know, it is her choice.
Okay. Like what I've said, possessions in your administration. Isa pa lang, sir. Pero ito na, kasi pahabol doon sa first. Okay. About Erwin Tulfo, it was reported that you're gonna appoint him as one of your presidential advisors. If so, on what?
No, that's really not been part of the plan for Erwin. No, we had other plans for him. Not as a presidential advisor.
But he would still be part of your administration.
I hope so. I hope so. Because whatever we say, difficulties that he faced with the Committee on Appointments and the CA, the time that he was running the DSWD, he did a very good job. So we can't lose that kind of asset. So we'll find something that he can do, so we can take advantage of his good instincts when it comes to social service.
Mr. President, still another position in your administration. May mga comments po ang mga senador na mag-appoint na po kayo ng secretary po sa DA and other groups para daw po mas matutukan ang ahensya. Your comment on that?
For me, there really are things that I can do that if there was a secretary and he or she did it, hindi magagawa pero matagal, madaming diskusyon, and you'll have to come up. Well, the president, they cannot say no to. And pag hindi nila ginawa yung utos ko, pwede kong sitahin. Yung secretary, pwede, alam mo na, you know, it can still be may pakiusap pa. And so that's what I bring to the position. Is that when I make a decision, I say, this is what we need to do, this is the plan, every one of you follow this plan. You do this, you do that, magtatasking tayo. Kailangan masunod yun. And if not, then I have, I can chastise them, I can move them aside, push them into other positions, etc., etc., etc. But generally speaking, if the president asks you to do something, they'll do it. If somebody else will do it, they may do it. They probably do it, but they may not. So we want to take that wiggle room out of that system.
And this is my second question, Mr. President. Just a few weeks after your visit to China, Chinese Coast Guard drove away Filipino fishing boats in Ayungin Shoal. What message does this give you? And what happened to President Xi Jinping's promise for a compromise?
Well, we haven't come to that compromise yet. And if the timing of what we refer to as shadowing, is what they do is they shadow our fishing boats. And so that incident happened right after I had returned from China. So we have immediately used with that thing, that mechanism that I talked about. Sinabi, we can even immediately contact the Chinese government, and hopefully, though our counterparts on the other side can bring to President Xi's attention this problem, and we have done that. But that does not preclude us from continuing to make protests and continuing to send note verbals concerning this. But you know, this is a long process because it is something new. I just hope we can come to some kind of arrangement, because I cannot see the utility for the Chinese of doing that. These fishing boats are not armed. They don't pose a threat to anyone. So I think that is something that we can achieve in the near term.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Cheryl Cosim of TV5. Next, we have Nelson Lubao of Net25.
Magandang hapon po,
Good afternoon.
Mr. President. Opo. Nice to meet you in person po. Ang aking pong katanungan ay marahil ay katanungan din ng mga simpleng mamamayan tungkol sa inyong foreign travels. Ang una po ay yung binanggit nyo na ang Pilipinas ay naging bahagi na ng tinatawag na BIP Club, Best Performing Economies in Asia. Paano po natin ire-reconcile yan dun sa iniisip naman ng karaniwang tao na pagpunta niya sa palengke, mahalang sibuyas, mahalang iba't iba pang presyo ng bilihin, tapos tayo ay best performing economies, Mr. President?
Dahil yung inflation ang pinag-uusapan. Isang aspeto lang yan sa ekonomiya. Kaya yun talaga problema, totoong problema yan. Dahil bumababa na ng konti dahil nagpapasok na tayo ng sibuyas, nagpapasok na tayo ng asukal. So kahit papaano, the supply will feed the demand at bababa ang presyo. Kaya yun ang para sa akin ay the reason na tinitignan ang Pilipinas na magandang performance dahil sa ibang bagay.
Okay.
Kasi maghanap ka ng bansa na 7.1% ang growth rate, na bumaba ng 4.2% ang unemployment rate, na mas mababa ngayon kaysa sa bago ng pandemya. Ibig sabihin, nakapag-create tayo ng halos 2 million jobs mula noong 2020 hanggang ngayon. At yung pati yung peso, medyo tumibay na. Kaya palagay ko, yun hindi lang ang inflation kasi lahat naman ng ibang bansa ganyan din ang inflation eh. Kaya kung titignan ninyo, ay sasabihin, ito yung mga ibang bagay na kaya't matibay. Kaya nabuo, gumawa, kasi wala namang VIP noon eh. Nangyari lang yan dahil nagpe-present tayo doon sa Davos at marami tayong pinakita, marami tayong paliwanag, marami tayong diskusyon sa kanila. Sabi na kasama na kayo doon sa grupong yun, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines. So sa Asia, yun ang tatlo na uunahin nilang tignan as investment destinations.
Pero ito pong performance natin sa ekonomiya ay siguro in the following months or days mararamdaman din ng karaniwang mamamayan.
Oh, siyempre, hindi naman kasi basta magpasok ako ng ilang tonelada ng sibuyas, bukas bababa na yung presyo. It has to go, dadaan pa sa sistema yan. It takes a little while. Pero hindi naman ganun katagal. This year talaga, yun ang problema kung hindi nagpapatulog sa akin yung inflation eh. That's what I lose sleep every night over is how to bring down inflation. So I'm determined to make sure that the inflation starts to come down in the first quarter and mag-normalize na pagkatapos nun.
Okay. Second question ko po, foreign travels din. Ang puna naman ng iba, bakit ba ang Pangulo ay travel ng travel? Ang dami namang problema sa bansa. Ano ba ang, sa tingin po ninyo, mahal na Pangulo, yung travel ninyo na talagang merong immediate effect sa mga Pilipino?
Ay, hindi. Proseso yan.
Matagal.
Proseso yan. Hindi yan yung pupunta ka tapos kakausapin mo yung korporasyon, nagustuhan ka, ito malaking pera, sige sa'yo na. Hindi ganoon. Magpapakilala muna tayo. Dahil pagka hindi tayo bumiyahe at nagpakita diyan sa mga conference na yan, hindi tayo iniisip. Wala sa isip nila ang Pilipinas. Siniisip lang nila, dito tayo sa Vietnam, diyan tayo sa Indonesia, o doon tayo sa China, doon tayo kung saan-saan. Hindi Pilipinas ang iniisip. Kailangan natin ipakita ang ating ginagawa para naman mapaganda ang potential na investment nila na dadalhin nila dito sa Pilipinas. Yun ang halaga ng mga biyaheng yan. At hindi lang yun. At meron din dahil sa halimbawa sa Davos ay ang subject matter laging pinag-uusapan ay how do we cooperate in a fragmented world dahil nagkaka-fragmentation na raw ang buong mundo dahil sa mga pangyayari sa pandemya, sa Ukraine, lahat 'ito. Paano ngayon natin ibabalik ang kooperasyon? Dahil naman, sang-ayon naman lahat sa pag-iisip na ang kooperasyon na sa bawat bansa ay mahalaga at hindi kakayanin ng kahit sinong gaano kayaman na bansa na nag-iisa. Kailangan may mga partner yan, kailangan may kaalyado yan. Kaya yun naman ay pagpunta natin sa mga ganyang conference, ay masasabi natin, the Philippines can play this part in fostering or in encouraging that cooperation. May lugar tayo. We are participating in the issues and the discussion and in our efforts in the community of nations. Kasi kailangan kasama tayo dyan. Pangatlo, I'm the new kid on the block. Nobody knows who I am. Kailangan ko magpakilala. Kasi pag sabi, bago ito. Sino ba to? May alam ba ito? Tama ba yung ginagawa? Ano bang klaseng tao yan? Yun ang mga, it's important also na magkaroon ng personal. Halimbawa, personal sa mga leader. Na kaya ko ngayon, hindi ko kaya gawin yun. Dati, ngayon kaya kong buhatin ng telepono, tumawag dyan sa lahat, tatanggapin naman ang tawag ko. At meron na kami mapapag-usapan. And that's very, very important. Kasi yun na nga, like in President Xi's case, siguro, never pa tayo nagkaroon ng contact at that level. Ngayon, dito nga sa mga ASEAN, sa mga APEC, nakilala ko na silang lahat. Kahit papano, meron ka ng koneksyon doon sa mga taong yan. So that's important. That's very important, lalo na. Ito nga, yung kagaya ng sinasabi sa Davos, in this fragmented world.
Salamat po.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nelson Lubao of Net25. On this side of the room, sir, we have Jun Soriao of UNTV.
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Good afternoon.
Nice to meet you po. In relation po doon sa tanong ni Kuya Nelson, sinabi niyo po sa noong Sabado sa Davos nga po na the Philippines is leading the economic recovery and performance not only in the Asia Pacific but in the whole world. Umani po ito ng maraming reaksyon o iba't ibang reaksyon. Di ba? Saan po nakuha po yung datos para patunayan po yung pahayag na yan?
Yung nabanggit ko, napakasimple. Pagka binabati tayo, anong lagi may sinasabi sa akin pagka na may nakakausap ako? Pag yung IMF, kasi kinocongratulate tayo, congratulations on your 7.1 growth rate. Si Widodo, ganun din. Congratulations on your 7.1 growth rate. It's the growth rate. Kasi yun talagang, lahat ng bansa nangutang ng husto dito nung pandemya. Tapos nung dumating ng Ukraine, palaki ng utang. Pasama ang Pilipinas doon. Hindi kasing lala ang sitwasyon natin sa mga ibang bansa, na karatig bansa natin. Ngunit mataas pa rin ang debt to GDP ratio kung tawagin. Kaya ang hihila lang, ang tutulong talaga sa atin na pagandahin ang debt to GDP ratio is growth. Yun lang talaga. Kaya yun ang tinitignan ng lahat. Dahil nung nagpa-pandemya noong 2020 hanggang 2022, kaduluduluhan ng 2022, ay talaga ang nangyari, namatay ang economic activity. Kaya yung mabilis magpabuhay ulit ng economic activity, makakalamang. Tayo, mabilis ang growth rate natin. Kaya nakikita, sinasabi na ito talaga, kaya nga nagkaroon nga ng VIP, nasama tayo dun. Kung hindi ako napunta sa Davos, VI lang yan. Ngayon, VIP na.
Second question, in relation pa rin po dun sa tanong ni Kuya Nelson, kakambal na po ng pangangako ng investment ng iba't ibang sa pagpunta ng mga dati ng presidente, nakarang presidente ng bansa, yung pangako nga po ng investment. Ano po? Yung iba po, pangako lang. Yung iba talagang hindi talaga natupad po. Katulad na lamang po ng investment na ipinako ng China noong nakarang administrasyon. Sa inyo po, paano niyo po masasabi na matagumpay yung mga ipinangako sa inyo ng iba't ibang mga leader ng bansa pagpatungkol po sa investment?
Nasa sa atin yun. Nasa sa atin yun. Kaya yung mga biyahe, nabanggit mo na rin, yung mga biyahe, medyo babawasan na namin for the rest of the year. Ang dahilan ay kailangan namin balikan lahat itong mga nasimulan sa ASEAN, sa APEC, sa China, pati yung pagpunta sa EU, sa Brussels, tapos itong biyahe dito sa Davos. Ay kailangan namin i-detalye yung aming pinag-usapan. Sino ba dito, tungkol dito, sino bang kinausap natin? Ano bang naging usapan natin? Dito sa lahat ng project na sinasabi, ano ba i-prioritize natin diyan? Kailangan na namin gawin yun. Hindi pa namin nagagawa dahil busy kami nga ng biyahe. Pero at least meron kaming naiuwi. Ngayon, kailangan na natin i-consolidate, kailangan na natin i-follow up, kukulitin na natin yung mga kausap natin, yung pinag-usapan natin, ituloy na natin ang usapan. Nasa sa atin talaga yon. Kung pababayaan natin yan, marami na tayong nakita. Nagpumirma ng katakot-takot ng MOU, wala naman nangyari. Kaya yung MOU para sa akin, maganda yan, okay yan, pero simula pa lang yan. Hindi pa yan project. Simula pa lang yan. Simula pa ng usapan para magkaroon ng project. Kaya marami pang gagawin. Kaya yung sinasabi ko kanina, proseso ito. Hindi ito yung basta't biglang mangyayari na yun na nga, may isang biyahe, uuwi ka, dami mong dalang investment. Hindi ganun. Kailangan dahan-dahan, tignan, pag-uusapan. And it's also, to put, etong mga biyaheng ganito ay, kung pagmamasdan ninyo yung mga meeting namin, yung tawag namin round table meeting sa mga negosyante, magkikwento kami, sasabihin ng Pilipinas, ganitong ginagawa namin, binago namin yun, meron kaming create law, maganda na mag-PPP, etc., etc. Okay. Lahat yan ay pinag-usapan. Pero ang ending lagi, sa palagay ninyo, ano pang kailangan namin gawin para mag-invest kayo dun sa amin? So it's interactive. Hindi lang kami nagsasalita doon, nagle-lecture doon. Nakikinig din kami sa kanila. Doon sa inyo, ano na bang nangyayari? May potential ba dyan? O ano mangyayari dyan? Huwag kayong titingin dyan, dito, may ano. Ganun ang interaction doon. Para mabigyan din tayo ng bagong kaalaman tungkol sa takbo ng ekonomiya. Halimbawa, kausap mo, yung katabi ko sa Davos, was the Moynihan, the head of the Bank of America. O, tinatanong ko, anong outlook ng Bank of America sa mundo? Ano yung tingin ninyo? Anong areas ang magiging masigla? Ano yung medyo may iiwanan? So, marami kang natutunan. Anong plano ng Bank of America? Saan kayo mag-i-invest? That's the only way. Kung hindi, at nangyari yun, nakausap ko ang head ng WTO, head ng IMF, ang head ng World Bank. Tungkol nga dyan, ina-analyze ko. Ano ba talagang nangyayari dyan? Ano sa palagay ninyo ang mangyayari? Saan tayo pwedeng umasa? Saan yung medyo mahina ang pagbago? So, it's a whole process, but they learn about us, but we certainly also learn about them. So that's also very important.
Thank you very much po.
Thank you. Thank you, Jun Soriao of UNTV. Next, we have Mela Lesmoras of PTV4.
Hi, good afternoon,
Good
Mr.
afternoon.
President. I'm Mela from PTV4. Sir, follow-up lang po dun sa nabanggit nyo na, yun nga, magbabawas na kayo rin ng biyahe this year. Pero saan-saan po kayo yung mga kumpirmado nyo ng pupuntahan at gaano ito kahalaga para sa ating bansa, yung mga biyaheng ito?
The only one na confirmed sa ngayon, APEC, November, sa States. Pero November pa yun. Hindi, kasi ang Philippine, dapat naman talaga ang Philippine President, kailangan pumunta sa lahat ng APEC. Importante talaga at maraming talagang napapag-usapan. Kahit yung, kung minsan 5 minutes lang, mag-uusap kayo. Pero mula doon, meron na, bigay na kayo ng number. Pwede mo nang tawagan, pwede mo na i-follow up. At kung minsan, ang nangyayari dyan, kaya kumpleto ang delegasyon namin. Dahil pinasabi ko, kung ano pang mangyari, kailan handa tayo. Nandyan yung sekretary na dapat magtrabaho. Nandyan yung staff niya para gawin na yung papeles. Hindi na mag-aantay na pag-uwi ng Pilipinas. Nandyan na lahat. Kailangan kompleto. Kasi itong mga biyaheng ito, 2 araw yan eh. 2 araw, mahaba na yung 3 araw. Ang dami mong gagawin doon sa 3 araw na yun. Kaya kailangan kompleto na kompleto ka. And that's why that we have tried to be very ready for that. The APEC, again, is one of those that I really have to, a Philippine president should really attend because it is the relationship, essentially, between ASEAN, the Philippines, and the rest of the world. And those are very, very important relationships. So, sa ngayon, yun pa lang ang na-confirm. November, APEC.
Opo.
Sa San Francisco ata.
Opo, and sir, kasi for my second question, about naman sa Maharlika Investment Fund ulit. Ngayon kasi, nagbalik session na ang Kongreso. Ano po yung mensahe nyo sa Senado? Kasi nasa kanila na ngayon yung bola patungkol dito sa MIF. At kailan nyo po ba target itong maisabatas mismo?
Ang message ko sa Senado, suriin ninyo na mabuti para maganda yung batas natin. Suriin ninyo na mabuti. Siyempre, mas maganda na matapos sa lalong madaling panahon. Pero, hindi naman dapat imadali. Dahil napaka-importante lahat ng bawat salita na ilalagay mo dun sa batas na yun, may kabuluhan yun. Hindi mo basta't pwedeng, tama na yan, okay na. Kailangan talagang pag-aralan na mabuti. Malaki naman ang tiwala ko sa mga senador. Alam naman nila yung kanilang trabaho. Pag-aaralan talaga nila na mabuti yan. And that's the process. Tama yun. Tama yun. But in terms of when scheduled, nag-release ng statement si Senate President na baka by Holy Week matapos na. Maganda yun. That would be good. But ako sa akin, mas importante na maging tama kaysa maging mabilis. So kailangan gawin nating tama. Kahit na lahat naman masyadong matagal eh. Pero basta makuha, we have to get it right. We cannot make that getting it wrong would be a very bad mistake.
Okay. Maraming salamat po, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mela. And we have Rico Hizon of CNN Philippines.
Hello, Mr. President.
Hi, Rico.
Rico Hizon, CNN Philippines. Tinanong niya yata lahat ng mga tanong na gusto kong tanungin ng aking mga fellow anchors.
I'm sure na maiisip ka.
Mr. President, I have been an OFW for 25 years. Hong Kong, London, and Singapore. And having worked with 2 global news organizations, I've been exposed to the best practices of various governments in the region and around the world. Good governance, transparency, and accountability. The Filipino people really want to know, from your 8 overseas trips in the last 7 months, how much have you spent per trip? Indonesia, Singapore, when you went to Europe, to China, and here in Davos, and the number of people in your official and unofficial entourage list. Para lang klaro po sa ating mamamayang Pilipino.
Well, I don't have the figures. I'm sure their figures are somewhere. But
Pero will it eventually be revealed, Mr. President,
well,
for the Filipino
I think
people?
once we've calculated everything, because this last trip, of course, was just we just finished during the weekend, and we came back on Saturday. So on terms of the cost, the way I see it, you have to look at it as ROI. Do we bring something back or do we not? If you say, I don't know, as I said, I don't know the exact figures of the costs and everything. But for example, we came back from China with pledges of 22 billion. Let's say we get actual out of that 1 billion. Bawing-bawi lahat ng 8 trips. Finished. That's the idea. And we did not only go to China. We went to Davos. We went to the EU. We went to ASEAN, we went to APEC. So in each of those, many pledges were signed. And as I said, it is up to us. Now, the measure of success will be, the cost benefit, very simple. How much effort did you put into it? It's not just the money. It's the time that you put into it. It's the time and the effort that goes into it is really, that's what I was trying to explain earlier, the reason that we have everyone on the delegation. Actually, the official delegation is just myself and the cabinet ministers. Then they have staff. So the rest are security. And the others that have been accompanying me are actually private sector. They don't actually fly with me. They go there on their own. Although they are included in our meetings, and they have their own meetings on the sidelines as well. So again, the way I approach it is ROI. How much did you spend? How much did you get? And again, as I'm saying, if we get just one of the MOUs, isa lang. Napakahina naman natin if isa lang ang makuha natin. Hindi namin ginagawa trabaho namin kung yun lang isa lang makuha natin. But sabihin na lang natin, isa lang ang makuha natin. Bawi na lahat ng trip ko.
Pero Mr. President, sinasabi rin ng mga kritiko that no matter how the government tries to invite investors to the country, but if there's a lack of transparency, accountability, the country does not really invite confidence.
I fully agree. So we will have transparency.
Ililista ba ninyo yung gastos, Mr. President?
So there will be accountability and transparency in everything that we do. That's axiomatic. Who's going to argue with that? That is one that, but it has not been an issue that the private businesses bring up. They bring up ease of doing business. They bring up the cost of energy. They bring up the problems of legislative guarantees. Ang legislative, lalo na sa PPPs, legislative guarantees, ibig sabihin na sa gitna ng project nila, papalitan yung batas, hindi nakikita yung project nila, pero pilit pa rin silang tapusin. Yun, yung mga nangyayari daw. Yan ang mga sabi nila, yan ang rinireklamo nila sa Pilipinas. So the critics will have their say. But those who are actually contemplating putting good money into the Philippines have other issues. That is not, accountability and transparency is not an issue.
Mr. President, you talk about the ease of doing business. You talk about power rates, which is one of the highest in Asia.
Not anymore. Not anymore. No, Europe is the same now as us.
But what are your plans during your administration to bring this down together with the private sector? Because that is one of the issues that is being raised by many investors around the world.
Before, medyo number 2 na lang ngayon. Dati number 1 talaga.
Kasi
yan.
hindi lang itong administration na ito. Even the past administrations have always been promising.
Yeah.
Let's improve the ease of doing business,
So,
the bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy has to be streamlined. The ease of doing business is because we're talking about trade. So the digitalization is going to be a very important part of that. We have to digitalize customs. We have to digitalize all of these collecting agencies so that the BIR, even the central bank, the payments can be made over the internet. All of those things that we don't do now. We have to remove the discretion. It's just like kung gawin, the thing is to lahat ng kahit wala kang kausap na tao, nagagawa mo yung kailangan mo. Kung makuha mo yung lisensya mo, makuha mo yung permit mo, makapagbayad ka nung whatever it is, ng fee, whatever it is to get your papers, whatever it is. So we came up against a very disturbing finding here in the Philippines. The ordinary Filipinos who have connectivity talk to every aspect of their lives through the internet, to the school of the children, to their business, to their friends. And the only entity that they do not talk to over the internet is the government, because the government is not digitalized. So let's digitalize the government, and that will take us a long way to helping in the ease of doing business. Now, the problem of energy is a very major one. It is a very major one because at the bottom of it is simple. The supply of power, the demand for power far exceeds the supply that we are producing. And there's also a problem in distribution, which is why the prices are so high. That has to be fixed also. But in the long term, once we fix what we can at home, in the long term, and that is one of the things that we will talk about a great deal on these trips, is bringing new power plants into the Philippines. And of course, we are stressing on renewables because we're trying to improve the mix of power generation between traditional and renewables. So that is, but that's a long term. Anything I start, anything this government starts, we will not see the end. Ang nuclear power plant, 6 years, 7 years. Ang floating wind turbine, 6 years, 7 years, ganun din. Anything is 6 years, 7 years. But we have to start. So that's what we're planning to do. We will start.
Isang tanong na lang, baka kasi hindi na ako
Magalit na
makakatanong
sila
eh. Mr. President, ang ating utang, 13.6 trillion pesos, ang taas-taas. And our debt-to-service ratio is more than 60%. Paano natin po ipababa ito?
I'm sorry, that's growth. We will pull ourselves out of debt via growth. That really is the guiding principle to the economic plan.
And through investments and the pledges that you will be focusing on.
Well, yes, make them real so that growth continues to pull us out and then provide new jobs. Now we're very proud that we're at 4.2% unemployment rate, which is like, you cannot have a recession if your employment rate's that low. But despite that, we still have to make the jobs more higher quality. We have to make them better. These green jobs, which is what we're talking about, and even the new technologies that are going to be used for our OFWs, all of these things, the upskilling, the reskilling, that's all we talk about. That's all, because those are the things that we need to do. It's not one simple thing. There is no silver bullet. We have to do very many things to make it right. Because what we are in fact doing is restructuring the entire Philippine economy to adjust to the new world global economy.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Rico.
Thank you, Rico, for the many questions. Let's move. Okay, let's move on to Sas Rogando Sasot of SMNI.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. SAS of SMNI News Channel. My first question is related to privatization. Earlier this month, Department of Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista revealed that you have plans to privatize the operations of NAIA. And as we all know, privatizing government assets has been a very contentious issue in our country. For example, the predecessor of your father, former President Quezon Aquino, has been lambasted for privatizing a lot of government assets.
We have no plans to privatize anything.
Okay.
There's no plan to privatize anything. Rather we do the opposite. No, when Secretary J.B. Bautista was talking about that, I think maybe he misspoke or he was misinterpreted. But you cannot privatize an airport to begin with. They cannot own the airport. No, a private firm cannot own the airport. At best, kasi na nga nagkakaproblema tayo dito sa airport. At again, in New York, meron kaming nakilala, the group that runs Gatwick Airport, they run London Airport, they run several big airports, that we're asking them, what can they do? Can they come in and help us so that we can increase the traffic through the Manila Airport? And they said they could. And so they're coming, they were here last week and to look at the operations of the airport, and especially since we had that problem in New Year's Day and this recent outage with the UPS. So at most, we will have a management contract. Come in and manage the airport. And they say that without changing anything, without changing, without new equipment, without building a new runway, that they can increase the traffic from what is presently, they refer to as 35 movements per hour to up to 45 movements per hour without changing anything. So we want that. And those skills can only be had from this group. And well, no, there are several groups, but they can be had from the private sector group who have huge experience in running ports and running airports.
Mr. President, my second question is about foreign policy. You have been very clear and emphatic since the start of your administration that you're going to continue the foreign policy doctrine of your predecessor, the friend to all, enemy to none foreign policy doctrine of non-alignment. My question is related to how further you're going to possibly refine or operationalize this doctrine. Does your administration see any opportunity in, for example, deepening engagement with the non-aligned movement, especially now that superpower rivalry, especially in our zone, might be intensifying sometime in the future?
Well, that was very much in response to the Cold War and the slow dismantling of the organs of the Cold War, if that's what you want, if that's how you want to put it, and that is why that non-aligned treaty was created between several nations who said that we no longer subscribe to the notion that we as a country must choose to side with one superpower or another, and that is precisely what we have undertaken. And that is exactly the position that I have taken in terms of foreign policy. Although this came up again in our discussions in the conference, is the question that was asked was very, very actually thought-provoking. Will geopolitics finally kill globalization? Because geopolitics is pulling people apart and all these aggruppations are being pulled apart. And the general conclusion is that countries realize that alliances are important, in fact, they're more than important, they're necessary. Nonetheless, these alliances do not mean that we are, again, within the sphere of influence of any great power. As a matter of fact, in ASEAN, we all came to the agreement that at the very least, in ASEAN, in the Asia-Pacific region, the future of the region must be decided by those in the region, not by some outside power. And so I think the idea, I do not know of the formal, I do not know of any formal meetings or conferences of the non-aligned nations. They used to have them. They don't have them very much anymore. I don't know about that, but we are very much in the spirit of that treaty. We are very much part of it in the sense that we continue to walk that very fine line between two great superpowers who are surrounding us both physically and geopolitically.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, SAS Reganda Sansot of SMNI. And last but not least, we have Ivan Mayrina of GMA7.
Mr. President, good afternoon. I'm Ivan Mayrina. I represent GMA Integrated News. Before I proceed to my two questions, I'd like to ask a follow-up question from Cheryl's question earlier about the latest incident in Ayungin Shoal. Mr. President, how do you intend to resolve the seeming disconnect between what gets agreed upon at your level, at the top level, and what gets implemented out at sea? I know you said there is no compromise yet, but in the meantime, our fishermen are being prevented from engaging in their livelihood.
Well, I think the actions that are needed are really from the Chinese side, and that is because we do not send Coast Guard boats into what we consider their waters or international waters. They stay within Philippine waters. And so that hopefully, as I said, the reason that it was important for me, let me clarify what we talked about with President Xi. And it was very simple. I said we have to raise the level of discourse between the Philippines and China. Now, we already have a bilateral group that's working on issues about the South China Sea. Now, my proposal is that we bring that bilateral group to a higher level. It's a sub-ministerial level ngayon. So let's bring it to a ministerial level. And I will ask my foreign secretary to be part of it. I will ask my ambassador to China to be part of it. And I guarantee you that if there is any decision that needs to be made, either of those gentlemen can pick up the telephone and talk to me. And within 5 minutes, we will have a decision. I hope that China can do the same. And that is what the President Xi was agreeable. And he said, why not? So he assigned his foreign minister to take care of the details. That's what we're working on now. Now, with the power structure in the People's Republic, I think that if the President Xi, puts out an order that we will not do that anymore, we will do something else, then I think it will be. I think the chain of command is fairly solid. Because again, we will be able to report any violations of whatever agreement we come to.
Unang tanong ko pala. Kamakailan po naglabas ng video si First Lady Lisa tungkol sa, naglabas siya ng warning sa mga taong gumagamit daw ng kanyang pangalan para ma-appoint. Apparently, it had something to do with appointments at the AFP. At sinabi niya, pag ginawa niyo yan, sasabihin ko sa asawa ko, huwag kayong i-appoint. My question, Mr. President, is how involved is the First Lady in your decisions with regard to appointments and in your governance in general?
Zero. She really has no input on that. The First Lady helps me in terms of the organization, because she's actually very, very good at that. Organizing which office, how the workflow goes, where the documents go through. She's a well-trained lawyer, so she's very good at that. And but that's the extent of it. We don't talk policy together. I mean, she'll comment. She generally say that, that looks good, that doesn't look good, I don't know why you're doing that, that's fine, what a great idea. But that's it.
Do you consult her on difficult decisions?
Not political, not political decision, legal. Oh yeah, legal. I will ask her. I will ask whenever there's a legal question. I'm not a lawyer, so I need an expert opinion. She's right next to me most of the time, so I can turn to her. I am very lucky, actually. I think I have the best legal representation of any president. I have a former Chief Justice as my executive secretary. I have JPE, who is working as a legal advisor to the president. And between all of these experts and legal luminaries, that's the only time that the discussion may include Lisa. But she doesn't come to the office and sit with us at all. If I have something to ask her, it's usually definitions. Define to me what is the legal definition of this? What is the legal definition of that? When they talk about this, what do they mean? What's the legal concept behind that? That's the kind of question, because she's a teacher. So that's the kind of question I ask her.
Last question, sir. Madalas nyo rin pong isama si Congressman Sandro sa inyong mga biyahe at sa inyong mga engagements. The question is the congressman being groomed as the next Marcos president?
Sandro? No. He's not being... We're not grooming him for anything. He's grooming himself. He has decided on this career in politics, and he will handle it the way he does. There's not some long-range plan that one day Sandro is going to be president. He will laugh in your face if you tell him that. But no, there's no. We don't think in those terms. He has worked in Ilocos Norte. Even talk of the presidency would be so premature, and it's not something that we plan. I mean, we'll see. I think he has the same attitude as I do. I'll take this as far. I'll do as well as I can, work as hard as I can, and take this as far as I can. Which is exactly what I said. Well, like when people talk about did you plan this to be president? I said, well, I was a congressman. I said, masarap din siguro mag-presidente, no? Governor ba? All these problems na hinaharap ko, maayos ko sana ito kung presidente na ako. Senador, ganun din. Diba? Everybody dreams to be the number one position. But that doesn't mean that we're plotting. We have this long-range plan. Not at all. Not at all. He's too busy anyway. He has too much work anyway. The reason he accompanies us is because he's an author of the Maharlika bill, the Maharlika Fund bill, and sometimes he has I had an interview with Financial Times. He took over when it came to the Maharlika bill because I had somewhere else to go. So siyang nag-explain. Author naman siya, dapat alam niya. So these recent trips, that's the reason why he has been with us.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much.
One round lang.
No round.
Round two. But let's wrap it up. Yeah, thank you so much to our friends in media, our anchors in broadcast media for being here in our sit down with Mr. President. And yeah, I hope you liked it.